With that said, I'm actually just wondering, Patrick, for you, like when you exercise in your nasal breathing, are you normally doing like endurance work or like strength or resistance training? Like what does that look like for nasal breathing?
Yeah, it's typically treadmill. Nothing too fancy. Just going for a jog, going for a run, and upping the gears, and then moving down through the gears. I always will maintain nasal breathing, so pretty much. And my nose is battered. Growing up in a tough town in Ireland, you get knocks as you're growing up.
Yeah.
So I don't have the perfect shaped nose either. So sometimes I'll wear a nasal dilator, which will help open up the nose. And it's really your ability to nasal breathe during physical exercise is influenced by a couple of things. One is the length of your bed hold time and how you breathe during rest, how you breathe during sleep, and the size of your airway as well. So if you have, for example, somebody who's mouth breathing during sleep, there are 6 or 8 hours that they are breathing hard and fast, and that can impact their breathing during physical exercise. And also, how they are breathing during the day is going to influence how you breathe during physical exercise. So when you're talking about endurance exercise, we should be thinking about breathing efficiency, and we should be thinking about breathing economics and understanding what's the optimal way to breathe in order to enhance gas exchange from the lungs into the blood, and also for oxygen to be delivered from the blood to the tissues. So nasal breathing, I suppose, Jay, is somewhere where everybody can start during physical exercise. And bring a tissue with you the first few times you're going to do it. Your nose is going to run. You've been forewarned. So bring your tissue. And just bear in mind that the air hunger that you experience when you first switch to nose breathing is going to be a little bit stronger. This is normal. And this just means that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood. It's not that your oxygen levels have dropped, because in actual fact, when you breathe through your nose during physical exercise, there's increased oxygen delivery from the blood to the tissues. And even though you are feeling air hunger, your body is going to be better oxygenated. The reason being is because the air hunger signifies that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood. And then when you look at the role of carbon dioxide, it's a catalyst for the release of oxygen from the red blood cells to the tissues and organs. So don't worry about the air hunger, but don't push yourself at an intensity that it's absolutely excruciating. It's not about forcing air in and out through the nose. It's about comfortable breathing, maintaining nasal breathing, and letting your nose dictate the intensity of exercise that you perform.
Hey, Jay here. Hate to interrupt this show, but I have to tell you about our amazing sponsor for today's episode. Yeah, it's Hanu Health. That's Hanu Health, my company. And I've got good news and I've got bad news. So the bad news is that I'm going to have to be quite cryptic for a while as to what we're building. But what I can say is that it is in the space of health technology, and it's going to be revolutionary. Just think about this show. You have myself, who is an expert in heart rate variability, and Patrick, who is an expert in breath work, and he is one of our primary advisors. And what's the good news? Well, even though you have no idea about what the company is offering as a product, we are offering an exclusive VIP waiting list so that you can be the first to know about it. Not only will you reserve your spot in line, you will also gain access to our informative newsletter. We will update you on where we are as a company and provide special incentives and promotions. All you need to do is go to hanuhealth.com/waitlist. That is hanuhealth.com/waitlist. I promise you will not want to miss out on what is to come. We are building the biohacker's dream, but it will be useful for every human being on this planet. I'm not even speaking in hyperbole. I'm serious. Every human could benefit from what we are making. So again, head on over to hanuhealth.com/waitlist to get your spot now, and I will just, leave you with bated breath. Now back to some killer Q&A. One of the interesting things when I started nasal breathing while exercising, which it's been a few years now, one of the first things is I didn't realize how often I was breathing from my mouth when I was going on a run. I mean, even in a really easy like zone 2 heart rate run, like I was almost solely breathing through my mouth, and I never realized that until I started focusing on that. And the other thing that I think that was probably even more interesting is that I would take these, breaths breaths through the nose. This was again when I was transitioning from mouth breathing to nasal breathing during, a workout. I would take these breaths through the nose and I would be so hyper focused on how stressful it was. Like, I'd be like, oh my goodness, this is the hardest thing ever. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do it. And then I was like, Jay, like, utilize kind of the skills about like fully embracing and being in the moment and just allowing, because my body was tensing up. Like I was, my throat was tensing up, my nasal pathways were tensing up. And so I allowed myself just to really relax into what I was doing, knowing that, yes, it's difficult. It's like if anybody's ever done, let's say like, a CO2 table or like a breath hold table, like it can feel excruciating at times, to hold your breath. This is different what we're talking about now. There is benefit to holding your breath while running, but we won't jump into that just yet. But one of the things that I just kind of really said is like, it's kind of like that old notion of like, embrace the suck. Just allow yourself to adapt, allow yourself to kind of just be in the moment, be right there connected to it. And things got a lot easier. And again, I think the best benefit I found is that performance increased. And I didn't feel like after a run, like I would get into to my office. I normally kind of come into my office after I shower, and like my mouth and throat would be so incredibly dry. And like, I would just feel like cooped out for the rest of the day. Like I couldn't do anything. I'm like, I just feel like I've expended all this energy, got a dry mouth, dry throat, and I don't feel like energized or vitalized, which it's so funny because now when I do that, if I go out for a 10-mile run nowadays, like I will come back and I will actually feel just pumped up and ready to go, which is very different than when I was mouth breathing and running. Is that something you've heard from like athletes? Like, have they had a similar experience to what I've had there?
Yeah, many. It's a very common feature. People say the recovery is much better, that after finishing physical exercise, that they often feel like they could go back out again. This is, I suppose, the most simplest thing. We have to think about our ancestors, and you hear all of the stories that, say, for example, we were in a very hot environment, and one of the rituals for a boy when he was to become a hunter was to take a mouthful of water and to run a distance and to reach the destination and spit out the mouthful of water. And you could think, well, this is kind of a strange ritual. But then again, is it really that strange? Because if we went for a run in a very hot environment, we are going to be very dehydrated quickly, and it could spell life or death. So, our ancestors were innate nasal breathers. The animal kingdom are innate nasal breathers, with the exception of a dog, which just uses its mouth to regulate body temperature. But of all species, human beings are the only ones that have forgotten about the importance of breathing through the nose. But when you look at the skulls of human beings going back maybe, centuries ago, you will always be able to determine that they were nasal breathers by virtue of the development of their head and their maxilla, which is their top jaw, because basically they were mouth closed, tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, and this helped to direct forward growth of the jaws and a wide facial structure, which is conducive to nasal breathing. So we know throughout our evolution that the nose is where it was at. It has got lost. I think, Jay, it just hasn't got a whole lot of attention, with the exception of a few sports medicine scientists. One would be George Dallam from, I think it's Evansville University in the United States. He's pretty interested in it. And he has put this to the test with 10 recreational athletes. He got them to breathe through their nose for 6 months, and he measured their efficiency after 6 months of nasal breathing. And pretty much they were able to maintain 100% of their work rate intensity with nasal breathing as with mouth breathing, but they had 22% less ventilation. Now, this is interesting because, and also the fraction of expired oxygen was less with nasal breathing. The respiratory rate was reduced with nasal breathing. I think it was 39 breaths per minute versus 49 breaths per minute. Carbon dioxide was higher in the blood with nose breathing, was 44 millimeters of mercury versus 40 with mouth breathing. So there's an efficiency here. If you can do the same physical exercise with 22% less ventilation, that's an economical saving, because there's an energy cost associated with breathing. And for endurance athletes, it must really be, attractive or a promising potential here. And yeah, it would be great to see more research. But like, coming back to it, it is tough at the start. Go a little bit slower. and the air hunger diminishes after about 5 or 6 weeks. If you do all of your physical exercise breathing in and out through your nose, you'll soon be able to maintain a pretty decent intensity with nasal breathing as with mouth breathing. But all of those things that Jay spoke about, you'll have a better recovery, your mouth is moist. Even dental health, which is poor, and it can be poor amongst runners, and it can be related to the distances that they run every week, because of course a dry mouth is more conducive to dental cavities, gum disease and bad breath. So for the sake of that, let's get the mouth closed.
Right. So again, if you haven't been sold on at least some of the effects of nasal breathing, then I'm not sure what else we can tell you. So that's what we have there. Thanks for listening to the Hanu Health Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. This podcast would not happen without listeners and supporters like you. And the best way to support us and the show is to head on over to iTunes and provide us with a 5-star review. This helps us reach others and spread the good word of breathing and stress resiliency. If we read your 5-star review on air, please reach out to podcast@hanuhealth.com with your name and mailing address, and we will send you some sweet Hanu gear. Until next time, breathe better and stress less.